First Class actually came about, the idea for it, during X-Men 2. We were filming, we were at the Vancouver Film Studios, and I don't know, one thing led to another. We're talking about kids, and I said, oh, wouldn't it be funny to see young Cyclops, young Wolverine, young Storm? And I said, we should do a young X-Men. And we all went, yeah, good idea. And we all talked about it. And then, of course, went back to the movie, and one movie led to another, and we never moved forward until Simon Kinberg read the First Class comics and went to the studio and said, hey, how about doing X-Men First Class?
Our first instinct was actually to make it more of a high school movie, to make it more about just the origin of the school.
And it didn't work.
It wasn't fresh enough in terms of the actual storytelling, and it wasn't in the sense of it did resemble too much Twilight and John Hughes and these other movies. It wasn't fresh enough in terms of the characters. We wanted to create characters we hadn't seen in the franchise before on film. And that's around the time that Bryan Singer got involved.
When I was directing X-Men 1 and 2, I would always think about the past when telling the actors what to do to inform their present behavior. So to be able to actually go back and execute that past that I had in my imagination was nice.
When Bryan became involved, we refocused all the attention onto Erik and Charles.
It had always been focused on Charles and Erik, but the age has changed. We realized that it would be better if we made the X-Men a little bit younger, the students younger. And then from that grew out the story that we're doing now. You know, we started talking about the villain. Who would be the villain? And I had always wanted to do Hellfire Club. So I brought them up, and they really intrigued Bryan. And then Bryan came up with the story setting it against the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The first order of business was to figure out at what period in history would Professor Xavier, Magneto have been in their mid-20s. And we figured, okay, early 60s. Now, what was happening during the 60s? Well, it was the height of the Cold War. And I think it was an exciting opportunity to explore what is ultimately a contemporary concept in this historical context.
We talked to Bryan about directing X-Men First Class. He had to leave because he was already committed to another film.
Bryan was under contract to Warner's. We all wanted him to stay on, and so he came on as one of our producers to, stay as involved as possible.
We just started making a list of directors that we thought could step in, could handle a movie like this that's not just complex technically, but also tonally and thematically, and somebody that could handle the texture of the film and not lose any of that within the action and the visual effects and all the other things they had to balance. And we came up with some really interesting guys and some interesting candidates.
Originally, when we set out looking for directors, there was lists of many directors, and Matthew wasn't on any of them because he had already been involved briefly with X-Men 3. It didn't work out, so he was not considered.
X3 was a weird process. It definitely burnt a bridge at Fox. I mean, I think they felt very let down when I said I was leaving. Although I felt like I'd done my job pretty well for them because they didn't have a script when I got onto X3. So in 6 days, Kinberg, me, and Zach Penn got a draft done.
He cast a lot of the movie. He prepped a lot of the movie. A lot of the crew that was ultimately the crew of the film were people that he had hired. Brett Ratner very valiantly took the movie on when Matthew left, but a lot of the reasons that Matthew left, some of them were personal reasons, and some of them were also, it was a very tough schedule.
When we signed on for X-Men 3, and Matthew had directed one movie, he had done Layer Cake, he was desperate to do X-Men. We pushed really, really hard to get it. We got it. And then I think just we came from a background of making small British movies.
I was really applying low-budget, independent filmmaking process to big-budget filmmaking. And the process is very different.
I think what Matthew's feelings are now, and when this came up again, was that he's now had more experience. He has a team around him that he trusts. He feels like he knows exactly what he's doing, and I think his feeling was that where the short deadline was something that worried him before, this time he felt confident that he could do it and he could make the movie he wanted to make in that amount of time.
I just finished Kick-Ass, literally. We just finished it. It's gone to the cinema. The idea of doing a movie so quickly wasn't even on my radar. All I could think about was having a vacation.
Right around that time, I went to go see Kick-Ass in the theaters, and I emailed him immediately when I came out of the movie theater, and he emailed me back saying, are you in LA right now, which is where I live, and he doesn't. Are you in LA right now, because I happen to be here.
The bloody volcano erupted in Iceland, so I couldn't leave. So I was stuck here, which was literally this time last year.
And so I met Matthew for a drink, and in the context of that first conversation, I told him about X-Men First Class. And I saw his eyes light up a little bit, because I knew he wanted to direct an X-Men movie under the right auspices, and he got excited about it. It just so happens that that same night, in that same restaurant, Bryan Singer was also having dinner.
An actor named Aaron Johnson, who was the lead in Kick-Ass, introduced Matthew to me.
Brian, hey, I'm Matthew. And he was like, you're joking. And so we went off and we just had a couple of drinks.
And Matthew was like, well, let me read the script. Read the script and liked it.
But I'm going to have to rewrite the whole bloody thing.
The story and the general shape and direction of the story had been formed and existed, but Matthew certainly wanted to take various things in different directions.
And I know they were nervous, and I said, no, look, guys, I'm going to stick to the story, but I'm just going to craft a film out of it. And then I was laughing, going, I pulled out of X3 because I didn't think there was enough time. Now I'm signing on to a movie where I've got less time, I have to create a whole new world, period. So I have to create a period, new actors.
Our schedule was insane. Our schedule was, we had a script, but we were still working on the script while prepping, which was very difficult because Matthew was the writer. So he had to spend half of the day writing and half of the day prepping, and you need a director full time.
But they did an immense amount of work to the screenplay in terms of changing character arcs, changing character dynamics, creating new characters.
One of the main things we felt was that the main core relationship of it should be between Charles and Erik. In earlier versions there had been perhaps more of a love triangle. Moira was a very, very central character who perhaps drove a lot of the elements of the plot. I think we were both just fascinated by the idea of the friendship that was always hinted at in the earlier films in the trilogy.
I will bring you home, old friend. And I ask only one thing in return. Don't get in my way.
This absolute respect and friendship that existed even through becoming sort of sworn enemies. And that was something we really, really wanted to explore.
If the story between Charles and Erik is on some level this, tragic romance, you've got to arrange the other elements in that way too.
Yeah, in this case, it's you have Hank and you have Raven, who end up being kind of the B-story version of the same thing you're seeing playing out with Charles and Erik. It's the making and then breaking of a relationship.
And then you have to take characters, like Moira, or Sebastian Shaw, and say, well, how do they fit in terms of the tension between Erik and Charles?
Come on, time for the tour.
Those group dynamics and friendship dynamics and couple dynamics, I think, are just endlessly fascinating to all of us. And but it's certainly one of the things that made it such a pleasure to write.
Then our budget was too big. Same problem as on all movies. So we had to rewrite the script, take out chunks to try to, squeeze the budget. But a script is like, a whole pack of dominoes. If you take one part out, the rest all fall. So it was trying to smooth and cement over these changes and make the script still work as a whole.
So there was massive amounts of rewriting that happened, and obviously all the prep, and the casting of a movie that's this complex in terms of the cast, and all the rehearsal time. All of that was from first inception to first shot, 6 months at the most.
I was terrified, thinking, hold on, am I that stupid? But there was a little bit of me that was still, I came so close to making an X-Men movie, and I really do love the X-Men universe, that I thought this is your last chance probably ever to do it.
Shooting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get them in and film.
I think for a lot of the directors that we had talked to about this film, part of what was daunting for them was, how do I balance 7, 10 different characters' point of views and maybe 5 or 6 real storylines? A lot of them started gravitating toward, can we just make it Erik and Charles's movie? And it is at its core Erik and Charles's movie, but it is also the story of Beast and Mystique. There's tons of different B, C, D love stories, villain plots in the film that are happening, and I think it needed a director like Matthew who could balance all those things and keep them alive in his mind to make it work.